Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Been kind of getting through these transfer portal grades, taking a look at some of the transfer portal classes that we've liked the most. And one of the classes that really doesn't get talked about enough is what Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers did during the transfer portal. We are going to be recapping it, giving it a grade, but this is one of the quiet classes. They didn't necessarily make a splash edition at the quarterback position like some other teams. But you take a look at the 13 transfers they brought in. A lot of these guys are going to be contributors day one for the Tigers. Now, before we get into it again, just always want to say thank you guys. There's been a lot of news for the LSU Tigers. Jujuan Johnson coming on board. Obviously, Logan Diggs coming in through the transfer portal. The support you guys have shown truly does mean a lot. This is one of the teams, though, that we are most high on heading into the 2023 season. So if you do enjoy the content, we will be talking some more LSU Tigers, so lock in, subscribe to the channel if you don't already. We appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. I'm going to ask you, who's your favorite addition for the LSU Tigers in this portal class here?
I think my guy is Omar Speights. And I'll tell you what, I think what Omar Speights does is it frees up Harold Perkins to go chase a Heisman. I think it allows Harold Perkins to line up on the edge, blitz, and kind of be that playmaker that he is, but have a guy in the middle who you don't have to worry about and is going to make a zillion tackles. Like that's what he was at Oregon State, a tackling machine, controlled the box essentially. And that's what I think they need or would want alongside Perkins to go let him wreak havoc, almost like how Micah Parsons plays.
Yeah, this is like you talk about who's the best player that LSU brought in, probably Denver Harris, the 5-star cornerback coming over from Texas A&M after 1 year. But I'm with you. I love the addition of Omar Speights. One, you kind of had a void maybe to fill in that linebacker room. And two, exactly what you said. Let Harold. I'm just gonna say it. Let Harold Perkins play the Micah Parsons role. You saw him do it towards the end of the year. Like, you don't want to pigeonhole him into be playing like this off-ball middle linebacker spot. Let him come off the edge. Let him blitz the A-gap. And that gets a lot more easy when you have a guy in Omar Speights who's going into his fifth year, senior year, who's had over 300 tackles in his career. I love that addition for the defense. I like the player, but I like even more what you said, what it allows Harold Perkins to do. But then we do have to talk about what they did on the defensive line too. Ali Gay going to the draft, Ojulari going to the draft. They revamped some edge rushers. And on the inside, this defensive line group, talk about having a guy like Mason Smith too, it's looking pretty nasty.
And frankly, I think given the level of talent LSU had on the defensive line last year, you probably would say it was slightly underwhelming. And again, they played really good football, but I think you kind of thought maybe you'd see those old school when LSU was really cooking and their defensive line was just incredible. It was a good unit, but it certainly wasn't dominant. And they bring in a handful of guys who, again, might kind of crank it up. I think Ovi from Texas, I get that Texas gets a bad rep a little bit on defense, but they played exceptionally good last year. You go and watch what Ovi did against TCU. Like, that's the type of guy you need. I mean, he was wrecking that game against a very good offensive line and what TCU had.
Yeah, and a couple other guys you see here. Jordan Jefferson, one of the best players on the defensive line for West Virginia. Paris Shanson, a really interesting cat coming over from Arizona, a guy that can play on the outside, can play on the inside, and then adding some depth on the inside with Jalen Lee, who probably isn't a starter. But when you talk about guys like Jordan Jefferson, Jalen Lee, being in your two deep as proven SEC guys that Jalen Lee is coming over from Florida, like Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, Jordan Jefferson, Jalen Lee on the inside, like you start feeling really good about this defensive line unit. Depth is something that we talk about a lot on the defensive line. LSU is going to have plenty of that in 2023.
And you knew they were still filling the depth out from what essentially Orgeron left him when he got fired, because a big turnover in the transfer portal, and you noted like there probably was just essentially everywhere they needed to reload depth wise, and I think this portal class is doing it. You see what they're doing in the high school recruiting ranks. It's right back where you want to see it if you're an LSU fan. So I think you're kind of like rebuilding that like holistic team where, again, they had stars last year, no doubt, Harold Perkins type guys who were just incredible football players. But now I think they are kind of rebuilding back that element of being a well-rounded, good football team.
Yeah, you had a magical season with Coach O when obviously you had Joe Burrow and they won that national title, one of the best college football teams we've seen in the last couple decades. I don't think LSU gets recognized enough for how poor of a job Coach O, or how poor of a position this roster was when Coach O left LSU. Like, you had at certain positions like one scholarship guy. So BK came in and, like, yeah, there were some growing pains, although he put a pretty damn good season together. There were some growing pains that needed to be had. Brian Kelly turned this roster around much quicker than I would have thought. And obviously the transfer portal is now a weapon that coaches can use early in their tenure at programs to kind of turn around rosters. Brian Kelly's done a phenomenal job in the last position group we're going to talk about. And it's probably the best position group they brought in, and that's the secondary. And it's starting off with a guy in Denver Harris, who out of high school, every Power 5 team in the country wanted, 5-star guy, had a very good true freshman year. Texas A&M just falls apart, and LSU gets probably, arguably, outside of Travis Hunter, potentially the most talented guy in the transfer portal in Denver Harris.
And you also, like, we talk about this, he's a young guy. He's going to be a part of this team for a couple of years now moving forward. And you saw, like, when LSU got torched, it typically came from the secondary. Like, Georgia threw for a lot of yards against that team. You saw what Tennessee did against LSU. I think what they're doing, again, just revamping, adding that type of, like, SEC talent, if you will, to kind of complement what they have going on in the front seven, which obviously was a solid unit last year. I just think, again, you're putting together a team that I feel like we almost don't appreciate how good they were last year because they had some real stinker games. Like, I think if they don't get crushed by LSU or Tennessee like that early, like, you just have a totally different feeling about where LSU is. But realistically, you look at their body of work, they put together a heck of a season, and to bring this type of portal class in on top of that, I mean, you got to be excited of where you are at LSU.
And you're seeing Jaden Daniels. Like, I'm seeing the Twitter rumors already with Jaden Daniels getting the first-round draft hype. And I kind of agree with it at points. Like, there are times where you watch Jaden Daniels, he's got the frame, he's got the arm talent, he's got the athleticism, where it's like, that's a first-round quarterback.
Jaden Daniels was good last year. If you want, like, they had some issues with the wide receiver play at times.
And the offensive line. Like, that offensive line was young, and it had some growing pains early. And I think that's kind of why Daniels got the job, is because they said we need some mobility at the quarterback spot. But when that offensive line started playing better and the wide receivers, guys like Malik Neighbors started to click, like, Daniels was playing some really good football.
When it came together, that team, they were really cooking, I thought, on offense. You even saw they played pretty good on offense against Georgia for a team. I mean, going up against that defense,
yes,
I thought they looked solid.
Yeah, and then to round out this cornerback room, J.K. Johnson, another young cat who is highly sought after out of high school, coming over from Ohio State. Deuce Chestnut, who I think is going to start at that nickel spot. He was phenomenal for Syracuse. And then a really interesting cat in Zy Alexander, who I'm not going to pretend like I've watched Zy Alexander play. I'm going to trust 24/7 in their scouting on this kid, but I do know length is king at the college football and the NFL level. Like, what do you see NFL organizations and college football programs value at that cornerback spot? It's length and it's athleticism, and Zy Alexander has both of that. This cornerback room, it was already kind of
big group of guys, long athletes,
and it's physical. And you take a look at how well-rounded this transfer portal class came together, addressing the needs that they might have lost through the NFL draft and in the portal. Like, this is a program that was good at the end.
One thing you could quibble with is, like, they didn't do a ton in the offensive side of the ball, but, like, realistically, that unit, when it got going by the back half of the year, it was ready to rock. And Aaron Anderson for sure is a nice get, especially you're replacing Keyshawn Boutte, but you're bringing back Malik Neighbors. He started to really
arguably one of the best wide receivers in the country, I might add.
And then Thomas, the other guy, like they're getting back their guys. Mason Taylor obviously coming back. So you have a young crop of guys coming back up front in the skill positions, and a young offensive line that got really or made as much improvement of a unit as I think in the country was made.
That group. When you saw, like, Will Campbell play against Jared, and I think we kind of overreacted to how bad that LSU offensive line was, because you're like, oh my God, they can't block a soul. Well, yeah, they were going up against Jared Verse, who turned out to be a potential top 10 pick. Will Anderson starting his first collegiate game as a true freshman. Like, that was a mismatch that we didn't really know about. Towards the end of the year, that offensive line was great. You know, the biggest steps of development come as your true freshman into your sophomore year. I expect those tackles to take big steps forward. I expect Daniels to take both big steps forward. And you add Aaron Anderson, you have neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. coming back. You talk about guys like Jalen Brown and Sampson coming in from the high school class. Like, this is, you noted, how well Brian Kelly was able to get this program back on track from a roster and talent management standpoint. Phenomenal job by BK. As sometimes hard to like as he is, for me at least, he is a phenomenal football coach, and I think he's doing a great job.
I know we all ignore him. They like to talk about Lincoln Riley and obviously what they're doing out there, but it's like you put LSU and USC on the same field. It's hard to convince me that LSU doesn't win that football.
And it's so weird because, Lincoln Riley got so much hype for what he did with USC, and he did a phenomenal job. I'm not taking anything away. It seems like nobody's talking about LSU. And like it's Georgia and Bama. LSU's right up there with both of those programs. And like arguably, I feel more confident about LSU in 2023 than I do in Alabama. And from you look at how crazy that sounds in year 2 under Brian Kelly from where this team was 2 years ago, 24 months ago. I mean, Brian Kelly's done a phenomenal job. This is one of the programs I say for the future. Like, BK is one of the best to do it. And he's in a program that is truly a sleeping giant. You're seeing him dominate the state of Louisiana in recruiting. Like, this LSU could be a rocket ship that's going to the moon. This is a program that we are very excited to keep an eye on. Again, if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Why not to hop on, give a short one on just kind of our overall thoughts on this LSU transfer portal. Appreciate you guys supporting the boys, and we'll talk to y'all later.